Maybe you could quote somebody who's alive, who's here to defend themselves before you do that. I wanted to ask you about this because I talk about the work of Richard Rohr a lot. I try to explain to people why I believe that his work is unbiblical and why this is not an Orthodox Christian view of Christ and of the world. And in his book, The Universal Christ, he actually quotes Chesterton to support his ultimately his view of the world, which is panentheism. And that's just generally the view that God created the world, but he exists in it and as it. So kind of like a hand fills a glove. He calls the universe the body of God.
Gotcha.
Creation is the first incarnation, but Christians kind of mix it up. We think that Jesus is the main deal, but it's really creation, and this cosmic Christ is in all created matter, and we just need to grab hold of it. And in the book, Richard Rohr even dedicates the book to his dog and calls his dog the Christ. So that's the end game of that. I feel like there's maybe a Babylon Bee article in that somewhere. But in sort of supporting this idea, he quotes Chesterton. And here's the quote he uses. He says, and this, by the way, on Kindle has close to 3,000 highlights, this quote that I'm about to read to you. So people his fans really loved this.
And this is a Chesterton quote he uses?
Yeah, well, it's the Chesterton quote and then his comment on it.
Okay.
So it says, as G.K. Chesterton once wrote, your religion is not the church you belong to, but the cosmos you live inside of, end quote. And then his comment is, once we know that the entire physical world around us, all of creation, is both the hiding place and the revelation place for God, this world becomes home, safe, enchanted, offering grace to any who look deeply. I call that kind of deep and calm seeing, quote unquote, contemplation. And so then he goes on to talk about the essential function of religion is to radically connect us with everything. And so he just goes on and kind of unpacks his panentheistic worldview, which really, at the end of it, he even says there's no atonement. You don't need atonement. You don't need to be saved. You just need to realize that you're inherently connected with God already. You've never been separated from God. And he quotes a lot of dead guys to support his views. And I sort of feel like if Chesterton were alive, he would push back on being used to support that worldview. And I wonder, how does that hit you? Rohr using the quote, your religion is not the church you belong to, but the cosmos you live inside of, in essence to defend his sort of cousin of pantheism, panentheism.
Right. I mean, it's a jump to say that, because Chesterton's obviously saying your religion, and he's jumping to your God is everything around you. And then, so it kind of, because that whole view of the God is everything, it's kind of like that idea that everything is unique. Isn't there ever nothing unique? Like if every single thing is God, is that just another way of saying there isn't a God? Like I get lost in it. It's a nothing statement to me. So I think Chesterton is saying, we tend to not tie our beliefs to reality. We make it all about the religion and what the religion makes us look like and how we look to our neighbors. And he's saying, my religion is wrapped up in the, just the beauty of the sunset or the children and the things around me. And we lose sight of that. And your faith should stick with you even if your church shuts down, kind of thing. It shouldn't be a club you're in. I went through that. I was big in Young Life. I met Christ through Young Life. And when I left Young Life, because I didn't know if I could be a Christian without it. And it was really hard for a while because it was this club and it was like everybody had their own same way of being. And, I think every group like that has the dangers of turning into a cult because people get very afraid of getting out of that because they become very safe with everybody thinking the same, becoming narrow.
Yeah, and it's almost like, as I read through Universal Christ, it's like he's taking a legitimate concept of the book of nature, right? The heavens declare the glory of God. There's actually, Romans 1 tells us there's things we can know about God by looking out into nature, even, his essence and some of his divine attributes. And I think Rohr is like saying, that's more important than the Bible, because he does say that. He's like, basically implies the Bible's just this thing that was written in the last nanosecond of history. So like, we need to look at this other thing that Christ just fills and animates in some way. And I was sort of, when I saw that he was using Chesterton to support that, I was like, maybe you could quote somebody who's alive, who's here to defend themselves before you do that.